We have finally got Coyote Vs Acme, a movie that it seemed we were never going to get, but it's here. We finally got it. So in this video, I will be giving you my spoiler-free review for Coyote Vs Acme, and just giving you my review and thoughts for this film. So without further ado, let's get into the review. Now to just quickly talk about the obvious elephant in the room, this movie wasn't even supposed to be released. Warner Brothers previously shelved this movie and had no plans on releasing it, and instead planned on taking a $30 million tax write-off, which is crazy to me because they had this movie fully edited, fully ready to go, but then last minute they wanted to pull the plug and never release this movie, which is so shocking to me because just putting myself in their shoes for the time that this movie was done with the editing and was ready to be released, my thought would have been this movie is going to make some good money because this is a movie for children, and they mainly have children as their main audience. So wouldn't you think all the kids would want to drag their parents to the theater to go see this movie? This movie would have done great, I would think. But apparently that just wasn't enough for Warner Brothers. They wanted to shelf it anyway, which to me is just absolutely crazy. But I'm so glad they didn't, because this just ended up being such an awesome, fun, and great film that I really ended up enjoying. So now actually getting into my review, I just want to talk quickly about the premise for this film, because it was a very fun one. We follow Wild Coyote, who after years of suffering at the hands of faulty Acme products, he decides to team up with a small-town lawyer and sue them. Now on just hearing that plot, you probably think, yeah, this is a fun movie that is definitely at least worth checking out with your kids at home, or even if you're a Looney Tunes fan, you can go check out in theaters, and you're not wrong. This plot was so good, in my opinion, and was very intriguing, and was really entertaining. So now getting into my positives for this movie. The first one, obviously, like I said, the premise. The premise was very nice, very well done, and really creative. And I found myself very entertained throughout this entire movie from start to finish. Now, continuing on with talking about the story, what was so awesome to me was the fact that they got almost all the Looney Tune characters that we are familiar with put in this movie. And that is just so awesome. The fact that they got those characters involved, and it was great to see them. They did some great things with those characters in this movie that I really enjoyed, and it was really just great to see them. And they really just made this movie so much more lovable for me, because I am a big fan of those characters. Another thing in this movie that I was very interested to see is Wild Coyote being the main protagonist and the main character. Now, the reason I say this is because Wild Coyote doesn't really talk. He's not known to use his words. He's a silent character that talks mainly through signs. But I feel like this movie did the right thing, pairing him up with Will Forte, who was also great in this movie. It just made the story so good, because they fixed that problem that going into this movie, I was really wondering how they would tackle that problem of Wild Coyote not really speaking. And at times when he threw up those signs, that was funny to me. That is in character for Wild Coyote, but it was still awesome to get to see him pair up with this lawyer character, and because of this lawyer character, the story made more sense, because it's harder to have a story when a character isn't speaking and could only express themselves through signs. But like I said, this movie tackled that problem immediately and handled it in such a great way, in my opinion. Now moving on, I want to talk about the comedy in this film, because the humor is definitely there. Just seeing these Looney Tunes interact with people in the real world, it just makes for such a funny story. And it was awesome to see the creative things that this movie did when it came to the Looney Tunes interacting with the humans. It was all just so well written and executed in this movie, and I really enjoyed that part of this film. Just like I said, seeing these Looney Tune characters interact with the real world, with real people, it was just done so well, in my opinion. Now really quickly, I just want to touch upon the way this movie made the Looney Tune characters and items that they had look. Now this was one of my favorite aspects of this movie, just the animation for these characters and the items that they had during the movie. The animation was so beautiful and looked so clean, so smooth, and so great. And when I was watching this movie, I was thinking to myself, this is so great. The animation I could just talk about forever because it was just so awesome and it looked absolutely flawless and amazing. So I definitely needed to make sure I mentioned it within this review. Now, another interesting thing for me in this movie that I liked is the fact that when you think Wile Coyote, you think kind of a villain. Not necessarily full-on villain, but kind of, a mean character. A not-so-nice character because he's a predator. He focuses a lot of his time on hunting another fan-favorite character. But this movie is so good with that. They know that he's not really necessarily the best when it comes to being nice, but you still feel for him when bad things happen to him in this movie, and you still kind of feel bad for him. And that to me is just so awesome. The fact that you could make your audience feel for a character that is kind of a villain, kind of a character that wants to hurt another character. This movie was just so brilliant with that, in my opinion. But now with some of the positives done, let's talk about some of the negatives. Now, this movie doesn't really have too many negatives, in my opinion. It was an overall pretty good movie to the point where it could avoid some of those negatives that other movies would have. But some of the negatives that I feel this movie has is that sometimes the movie drags and the story can get a little convoluted, and it does lose focus by the end of the movie a little bit. But besides that, there's really no negatives. The negatives for this film were very, very little for me. But those were just some of them that I noticed when I was watching the movie. But besides that, really nothing else was a big negative for me. And even these negatives that I mentioned, they're not big negatives that really weigh the movie down for me or even somebody else who is watching this movie. These negatives will not weigh the movie down for you probably, but these negatives just remind you that as good as this movie is, there are some problems with it. It's not a perfect movie by any means. It's definitely a good movie, but it is not a perfect one. And at the end of the day, that's all that these negatives were, to me, in my opinion. They were little nitpicks, not big negative things that really weigh the movie down. If you're a big Looney Tunes fan, you could definitely look past these little nitpicks and just say, oh, this is a perfect movie. In my opinion, it is not a perfect movie. But for a Looney Tunes fan or a little kid, they could definitely think that this is near a perfect movie. But for me, these are just little nitpicks that kind of hold it back just a little bit. But that is where I'm going to end this review for this movie. It was great. It was a very fun time, and I feel like kids and their parents would definitely have a fun time in theaters with this movie. And same thing with Looney Tunes fans. I feel like they would enjoy this movie just as much as well, if not more, because I certainly enjoyed this movie and thought it was a fun time. But I would now like to hear what you guys think in the comments down below. When you get around to seeing this movie, what did you think of it? What did you love? What did you hate? Are you even a Looney Tunes fan? I would love to hear all of it down below in the comments. But with that, I would like to thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like it and maybe check out some of my other videos on my channel. But with all that being said, I'll see you guys on the next video.